Up next on Inside the SCCA, Super Touring at Buttonwillow. Welcome to this edition of Inside the SCCA. I'm Brian Bielanski. Joining me today on the show is Caleb Shrader. Caleb is one of those very, very fast young racers that us old guys hate seeing in the rearview mirror. Welcome to the show, Caleb.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you here. Caleb is a two-time Runoffs podium finisher, twice in 2023. What was it, third place in both times or third and second?
Third in both.
Okay, so third place in Spec Racer 4-3, third place in FE2. And for those of you who have seen him race, either at the Runoffs or out here on the West Coast, this kid is super fast. So that's why we've got him here. All right, Caleb, we start the whole show every single time with the same first question. And since this is your first time on, you get the question. How did you get mixed up in this crazy sport that we love?
Well, I will say, so I started racing back in 2019 was my first full season. I did that in a go-karting season. I did a full year in go-karting in the West Coast and then did some national races. But once that season was over, my dad and I had a meeting with Todd Harris, who is the Pro Drive owner for PIR and the whole race team that runs with Flat Out. Had a nice talk with them and then signed a deal to run one of his Spec Racer Fords for the 2020 season. And then every season was good, just trying to get the ropes on everything. And then once that season was done, I did another season. And then halfway through, I got my own car, went to Flat Out, and then kept getting wins, championships. And then here we are.
Here we are. So when you started in karts, though, what got you interested in karts in the first place?
So about like when I was 12, so about 7 years ago, my dad and I went to a K1 Speed in California when we were on vacation. And ever since he beat me that day, beat me by like a couple seconds as I was still young, I always had the goal to make sure I finished ahead of him one of these times. And then 7 years later, finally got the chance to finish ahead of him and just wanted to keep going and going until there's a good end in sight.
Yeah, I find as a parent, when there's that time when the kid's getting better and better at anything, whether it's racing or golf or whatever, and then the kid catches you, and then it's like you're always trying to catch the kid from that point on. So I get that completely. So no racing background in your family prior to going to K1 karts, huh?
I mean, my dad tried to do some racing, but didn't have the money for it.
Sure.
I mean, he did a little bit of motocross, but nothing towards like karting or cars or anything like that.
Great. Cool. Well, you're an unusual story in the SCCA. Most of the time when we've got a young kid who's racing, it's because the family's been doing it for years and they just, it's what they ended up doing. So love that. How quickly did you kind of start to really progress in karts?
So when I did my first basically my first season before I went in the cars, I was just trying to improve as much as possible. I was trying to do a lot of practice, lots of practice, thousands of laps per week at my local go-kart track in Canby. And I would be driving as much as I humanly possible just to try and get build the stamina, build the strength, do all that kind of stuff. And then once I got to the end of the season, I feel like there could be more.
Sure.
So then once we took that step to cars, it was basically like driving a go-kart.
Right.
But it's just more weight, more horsepower, everything like that. But I got used to it really quickly, and I love it.
Yeah. You get hooked. It doesn't take long to get hooked. So the K1 karts are the electric karts. When you went to your local kart track, you're up in Oregon, right?
Correct.
Right. So when you went to your local kart track, I'm guessing that was an outdoor track with shifter karts and 100cc karts. What did you go to first?
I went to Briggs & Stratton LO206.
Okay.
Good way to start out with.
Sure.
And then I went to Tag X30.
Got it. Yep.
And then shifter.
Got it. Got it. And that was all within one season?
Yeah.
Cool. That was a
I
pretty...
was the only person on the West Coast at the time to run 3 classes per weekend.
Oh, so you ran those every weekend?
For the beginning of the season, I just did 206, but
Right.
then towards the end of the season, when there was bigger races, I did multiple.
Wow, that must have been busy.
It was, and very tiring.
And was Dad doing the support for everything, or did you work with a bigger team?
My dad was 99% of it, and then the other 1% was just the team making sure they had everything they could to try and help me.
Very cool. Very cool. So when you graduated from that to Spec Racer Ford, how was that transition for you?
I mean, it was completely different because I only had 2 days of practice at Buttonwillow before I had my first race at Auto Club, RIP Auto Club.
Yep.
But it was a interesting experience. I was just trying to get as much time in the car as possible, learning how the drafting works, downshifting. Because at the time, I didn't know how to drive a manual shifter. So I was just also trying to get used to the clutch and the downshift, heel toe downshifting, everything. So it took me a full season to get through everything.
Right.
And 2021 was the last season with all the manual before I went to SADEV, which the SADEV definitely helped a lot.
Right, right. So the shifter carts are paddle shifters, right?
No, it's a little handle.
Okay.
So if you push it down, you're downshifting. If you push it up, it's upshifting.
But it is sequential, so it's more like the SADEV.
You don't need a clutch.
Yeah, you don't use the clutch. It's more like the SADEV. So you had to. Most of us old people, we learned how to do an H pattern first, then had to go and do a paddle shift or a sequential shift. You did it the other way around.
Yes.
I can imagine how difficult that transition can be. So, but and how long did it take you once you switched to Spec Racer Ford to start running up in the lead pack?
I mean, when I ran the Auto Club major race in January, since our season is usually January to May.
Right.
First race, I got lapped. So,
yep.
At Auto Club, just because of the draft.
Sure.
I couldn't figure out the draft. And then the Super Tour the next month was at Buttonwillow, and I was 4th and 5th.
Nice. That didn't take long. Yeah, the difference between Auto Club and a standard road course is dramatic, isn't it?
Yes.
With all of that, because at Auto Club, for those who don't know, they basically they come out onto the oval at the exit of turn 4, and then you go all the way through turn NASCAR 1 and 2, and then you come back into the infield between 2 and 3. So a lot of time flat out, especially in a Spec Racer Ford, and that draft is just so critical. So very cool. 4th and 5th at Buttonwillow. What year was that? Do you remember?
2020.
That was 2020. So now, how did that 2020 season end up with you after you went through the whole season?
After that season was done, I basically was ready to do another season, but this time the full season, because I only did the January, February, major Super Tour, and then I only did the regionals after that.
Okay.
Try and learn.
Sure.
Because I also, with the Harrises, I also had the Harris duo of Calvin and Taylor, sons, who are very fast.
Sure.
Especially at Portland, because they have more laps than anyone probably ever, besides Todd. But I was trying to get all the learning from them, and they helped a lot with me for the beginning of my career in the cars.
Sure. And you did something that I always recommend people do. You didn't go out and buy a car right away. You went to a team, an established team, to get not only to be able to figure out if this is what you want to do, but more importantly, pretty much all of the arrive and drive teams out there have some form of coaching. They give you some knowledge. They have the cars are usually set up perfectly or very close to perfectly for the particular tracks, because they go to those tracks all the time. So you take all of that part of the equation out, and then you just need to learn how to drive.
Yes.
How much support did you get from Harris in that whole process?
Everything that they were able to give me.
Yeah. That's great. And then 2021 rolls around. You do the full Spec Racer Ford season. How'd that season go for you?
I did the full major season. I won the championship by 2 points over John Black, who obviously is another fast Spec Racer Ford driver.
Right.
And national champion.
Right.
Had a nice little duel, came all the way down to Portland, which is our last round.
Right.
Because we don't count Pacific, because none of us go to Pacific.
Sure.
We have a deal. So Portland is our last round, and it just came down to a draft fest.
Right.
I actually DNF'd the last race because my steering column broke.
Wow.
So I basically went straight in turn one and couldn't stop. And then John had to finish below fourth, and he finished fifth. So I got the championship.
Nice.
And then went to the runoffs that same year.
Right. How was your runoffs trip in 21?
21 was Indy. So I finished ninth after starting 18th.
Wow, that's a pretty good improvement at Indy, and especially as your first time there and your first time in the runoffs. Very different feel when you get to the runoffs that first time, isn't it?
It is very different, yes.
And talk about, so your first time at Indy, I don't know. See, you don't have the when I was growing up, the only race ever at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was the Indy 500. You know, and those of us who were in the sport were like, that was very much unobtainium. And now, that Brickyard came, and now they're renting out the track for organizations like SCCA. So it's a little, I think, less legendary for some of the younger folks, but it had to have been pretty cool going through the tunnel for the first time. What was that experience for you?
Indy is a very cool track, and
Yeah.
I do miss going there. I mean, I've only been there once, and I want to go there again. Hopefully one day in the Indy 500, but you never know.
No, I like it. So then the next season, how did your 2022 go? Right? Is that next? Is that where we're at next?
Yeah.
Cool.
So the 2022 season, the West Coast, it was my first season doing FE2.
Right.
Because I did a test in 21 at Laguna Seca, and then with Bulldog Motorsports, who basically runs with Flat Out.
Okay.
They're a California-based team that runs only the FEs and prototypes. So by 2022 season, I finished second in both championships. Both championships were won by TJ Aker, who is a California-based driver.
Yep.
Who also runs at Buttonwillow.
Yep.
I tried my best to stay with him, but in the SRF, it was basically he had teammates that were able to help him. I was basically by myself. So I basically was trying to get to him, but the draft, because they were just trying to push away from me.
Sure.
And then FE2, I was just still learning how to drive it.
Right.
So he won every race.
Right. And then did you go to the runoffs in both classes in 22?
Yes, I went to the runoffs in both. I finished 5th in SRF and 4th in FE.
Nothing wrong with that. All right, so now let's move on to 2023, racing both cars again.
Yes.
We don't have to recap the entire season, but I just want to talk about Thunderhill for a few minutes. You and John Black put on the most entertaining show in both races at Thunderhill. It's like he's like, I'm not letting the kid by, and then I got to let the kid by, and then I'm going to get back. It was just so much fun. Did you have as much fun in the car as we had watching it?
Oh, I had a blast driving it. I know when I was leading the first race, on the last turn, my car cut out, which was annoying.
Right.
But
of course.
I still finished second.
Yeah.
I'm still happy about. And then the second race was the rain race, and we were very close, and then he barely got me.
Yeah. And that was in FE2, or was that in Spec Racer 4? I don't remember now. What's that? SRF, right. And then how did the FE2 race go that weekend? I think you won both of them, right?
I won both of them and got the track record.
Yeah. Good weekend. Very good weekend. Yeah, we had a blast. If anybody wants some good entertainment, go back to the SCCA official YouTube page and pull up the Thunderhill Super Tours and watch both the FE2 and the Spec Racer Ford races. Very, very entertaining. And Lefty and I were calling those races, and it was like at the end, I'm like, okay, I need to go take a nap because I am worn out. But lots of fun. All right, you head to the runoffs and had a pretty good run at the runoffs this past year. How'd that go for you?
FE2, I was basically third the entire weekend. The only two people that were in front of me were Franklin Frutrail and Russ Turner, who are two amazingly fast drivers as well.
Right.
I couldn't keep up with them, but I was also I was by myself in third. So I was hoping the race was going to stay full yellow after their incident and the first lap, but it didn't because someone crashed in Oak Tree.
Right.
Finished third under yellow. And then in the SRF race, I was 10th at the time, and then Schofield and Morgan got into it,
Right.
going down the roller coaster, which sent me and Bobby off into the grass. Luckily, I didn't blow my motor. I was able to just keep going. Problem is, I didn't have any help because everyone that was with me kept blowing up their motors.
Right.
I don't know why.
Yeah, it was weird.
And then I finished 4th, and then afterwards in tech, someone in front of me got DQ'd, and I finished 3rd.
Great. Well, there you go. 3rd place, 2 third places at the runoffs, and setting you up for this year. You were here at Buttonwillow for the January race, and how did that weekend go for you as you get ready to walk into the Super Tour here?
FE2, I won both days and got the track record on that layout, and then the spec, I was 1st on Saturday, 2nd on Sunday in a drag race.
Got it. So when Caleb says on that layout, there's 25 layouts at Buttonwillow that can be used. What's that?
Many.
Yes, many. And you can do both, and you can do them all in both directions. So it's like 50 layouts. But so yeah, we have multiple track records depending on the layout, and that's pretty awesome. All right, so let's get to Super Tour at Buttonwillow. Clearly, you know your way around that track. Let's first talk about the difference between Spec Racer Ford and FE2. They're both the spec classes, usually some really great stiff competition. How do you prepare differently for each car when you get ready to get into them?
FE2, I try and go faster in every turn just because I have all the aero.
Right.
In the SRF, I try and take it easy and see what I need to do more braking, more coasting, all that. Since in the FE2, I can just fly it into a turn and I have the aero that comes with it.
Right. Yeah, a lot more need to keep momentum going on the Spec Racer Ford cars, because that is how you make your speed there at the end of the straightaways, is by being able to pull as much momentum through the corners, right?
Correct.
So, what do you find challenging about Buttonwillow?
What I find challenging is what I think is just the surface, because the surface is really old. So every time you go there, it's a completely different track.
Right. And is that harder in one of the two cars than the other, or does it kind of work out the same way for both?
I'd say harder in the SRF, just because you can't coast as much. You actually have to brake more than you have to, just to try and get the car to stay planted onto the ground or towards the apex. Because if you're offline barely, it's just dirt and you're going to go flying off.
Right. What's the difference in grip level between the two tires in the two cars?
I'd say the FE2 definitely has way more grip. I mean, it is a slightly bigger tire.
Right.
And it has more rotation because of the aero. So I'd say the FE2 is definitely a way faster, or way better to drive at Buttonwillow than the SRF.
Right. Is the FE, is that mechanical grip or is that aero grip?
I'd say aero.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of figuring. So who are your playing partners in Spec Racer Ford when you get there? Do you have any? Because I know there's that huge MBI contingent. And
MBI always brings up 10 cars,
right,
leading usually by Mike Mezzardino, who is one of the track owners,
right,
who has more laps than anyone at that track.
Right.
And he is one hard person to beat.
He is obviously I've seen him a lot since I'm based down here in California, and I do all of the Cal Club races. He is the track manager. Cal Club owns the track, but he is the guy who manages it. So you're right. He's got access to a lot of time and everything. When you're dealing with someone like Mike, who has got a boatload of experience in general, and then a boatload of experience at that particular track, and you're the young kid coming up, how is that dynamic?
So he's obviously has all the track time, so I just always learn. So usually in the races, I just want to push him away from everyone.
Right.
I'm very comfortable pushing and just being behind and just watching.
Right.
And then if they do make a mistake, I usually don't go by. I just let them go.
Right.
And then toward the end of the race, I'll go by and then try and block. And then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right. Is it similar in FE2 as far as, where you work together with folks, or is that just a completely different beast?
Completely different beast. In FE2, I'm always by myself.
Yeah. When you're in a Spec Racer Ford, where do you want to be on the last lap? Second place?
It depends on the layout, because there is 50 plus layouts.
Sure.
For the layout that we're running for the Super Tour, you want to be, I think, second.
Right. And there's not a ton of great passing zones at Buttonwillow on that layout, right?
I mean, if depending on how risky you want to go, there is always obviously Riverside, which is the very fast 100 plus mile per hour 90-degree turn. But otherwise, there really isn't like anything besides Mazda, Phil Hill, or Sunset Sunrise.
Right. So, and I'm not going to ask you which is the best one because I don't want you giving anything away. What do you what is your plan for this year as far as schedule wise, and where do you plan to go?
The plan is to try and just do one race at a time. I am signed up for the whole year for SCCA.
Okay.
Not for anything on the East Coast besides the June sprints.
Okay.
But hopefully there is more racing to come. I am willing to take any opportunity I get. Have I got that opportunity? No. But I'm willing to learn anything I drive and try and drive as much as possible.
Do you have anything going on outside of the SCCA at the moment?
I do not.
Okay. Now, I know you mentioned you would love to drive at Indy in the Indy 500. What do you think? Because right now is kind of seems like the golden moment for SCCA. A lot of SCCA drivers are getting a chance to go play in other series. We've got Connor Zilich, who just signed a NASCAR deal, and he's doing some IMSA stuff. We've got Tom O'Gorman and Morgan Burkhart, who are doing Pilot Challenge. And if you look at the Rolex 24 weekend across all of the series, there's a ton of SCCA folks who are doing that. Do you want to head towards more sports cars, or are you more interested in the open wheel ladder?
It depends. I would say I just take anything I can get.
Sure.
I would really drive anything at this point,
right?
Just because of where I'm standing right now.
Yeah.
I obviously I love SCCA,
sure,
but I can't be here forever.
Right.
I need to move up somewhere, but I haven't been able to get that opportunity yet.
If you could decide, if you could just go wherever you wanted to go, where would your next step be?
I would say NASCAR ARCA Menard Series.
Okay, and why that as opposed to doing something on the road, mostly road racing world, which is where most of your experience is?
Well, I'd say is what I'm trying to. I would think that the NASCAR world has more gentleman drivers and nicer people to race with than in the open wheel world.
Interesting. Okay,
that's my take.
That's fine. So I don't know if you had a chance to watch the episode we did with Jason Pribble, but he's a young guy like you, and he's trying to make his way up through the ranks as well. And he's talked about, he's had some moderate success in doing some testing with some of the pro teams and all that kind of stuff. What is the difficulty, that you have found in finding that team to take a chance on you?
I haven't got any opportunities for testing. Like, I haven't been able to drive their cars.
Sure.
I just want to test the car if I'm able to, just to see how I can compare against their normal drivers.
Sure.
But I feel like that I can be somewhat close to their times or competitive if I have enough time in that car per day.
Right.
But it also doesn't help when you don't have any sponsors.
Sure.
In this world, because obviously racing is a very expensive sport.
Right. How much is it also based on location? You're up in Portland, and there's not nearly as much stuff on the West Coast as there is on the East Coast, and certainly not as much in the Pacific Northwest as even in California. Would being in a different part of the country get you in front of the eyes of some people easier? Would that make it easier?
Yes.
Yeah. One word answer. So the key is, I guess, to get you out east to do some more racing on the East Coast.
I mean, hopefully there would be an opportunity. I mean, I'm willing to run in any of the super tours on the East Coast,
right,
with the normal East Coast runners. But I'd also like them to come to the West Coast to have some fun, which that won't happen.
Yeah, not so much. And that's unfortunate, and I get it. There's a hill that you got to drive over to get here, and it costs a ton of money. But there are a lot of folks from the West Coast who are going to the East Coast and spending their hard-earned money to do that. I know Scotty B. White takes about, it seems like 35 people out east every time. That's an exaggeration, but he's got a lot of cars that he supports, and I know there's some other folks from the Pacific Northwest who go a lot. Not as much from Southern California, honestly, which I find interesting. But yeah, how do we get the East Coast drivers to come out here a little bit more?
I would just hope that I know there'd never be a runoffs on the West Coast, but I mean, having some sort of like huge race that would appeal the East Coast audience.
Yeah.
Obviously not have them come all the way to Portland or Buttonwillow or that, but like finding a place like somewhere in the Southwest, probably not all the way up north in California, but like somewhere to where they're willing to drive that amount.
Yeah.
Have like a big race.
Yeah, we had the runoffs out here maybe 10 years ago at Laguna and at Sonoma, and unfortunately, like we said, the numbers were just down because people didn't want to tow, and that makes it hard for the club to make the decision to come out here, because you can lose money, but you certainly don't want to, and it's an expensive proposition to put a runoffs on. So cool. So some folks I'm sure have helped you along the way. Do you want to do some thank yous here before we head out?
My biggest thank you would obviously have to be to my parents, my mom and dad. They've done everything they can to get me to this point. All my sponsors, Liquid Death, Take Liquor Firearms, Taboo Video, Riverside Trucking, more, and everyone else. They've helped me essentially with everything that's come around. My girlfriend for being my #1 fan. Helps a lot.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. And then just all the teams, Vic from Flat Out, Jason from Bulldog, everyone else, just helping me get to where I am today. Otherwise, I don't know where I'd be today. Sure.
Well, anybody who's watching, this kid is super, super fast and a really good guy. And if you want that type of person on your team, you need to reach out and give them a call and help them out in any way you can. If people are out there and say, hey, we'd like to put you in a car, how do they get a hold of you?
They can either contact my dad, or they can just look up my social media at Caleb Shrader Racing on Instagram.
Got it.
And just message me there, relay it to my dad, and then we'll figure something out and go from there.
All right. Drop into his DMs, folks, and get him some pro tests or something, because this guy needs an opportunity. And I think if you just keep at it, it's going to come. And I've been watching you since day one, because I was at that first Auto Club race that you were at, and I think I've seen every race that you. Well, I know I've seen every race that you've done at Buttonwillow. So he doesn't make mistakes. He drives fast as can be. He brings home the car most of the time, just like anybody, with all the wheels pointing in the right direction. So let's get Caleb a ride out there, folks. All right, thank you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you this weekend at Buttonwillow.
Thank you for having me. I was very glad to be here.
All right, that's Caleb Shrader, two-time runoffs podium finisher here on Inside the SCCA. That's going to do it for this week's episode. If you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the RacingWire Podcast Network so you won't miss any episodes. It would also be great if you leave a comment, especially if it's a good one. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is, or leave a question on Twitter. It's at RacingWireNet. And it's Inside the SCCA on Instagram. A new Inside the SCCA every weekend here every week here on the podcast network and on YouTube. It's the Racing Network on YouTube. I'm Brian Bielanski. Have yourself a fantastic weekend. Stay safe and go play with cars.
I'm Dorsey Shrader, and when I'm on my way to a race, I'll listen to the SCCA podcast, Inside the Short Bus.
Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the RacingWire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.